So good morning. Welcome back to the first panel discussion of the day. A big thanks to Charmaine for being willing to moderate this panel discussion for us. And thank you, Meera and Kiran, for being the panelist for this wonderful topic that we are very, very close to our hearts. Empathy, how to create empathy among stakeholders. That's what we are going to talk about. To kick off the discussion, let me invite our student volunteer, Anantita, to introduce our moderator. Over to you, Anantita.
Good morning, everyone. I'll be introducing Dr. Charmaine Kanita. Dr. Charmaine Kanita is a medical professional, creative conceptualizer, and writer. With experience of 10 plus years across niches as diverse as education, IoT, robotics, manufacturing, and retail and hospitality, her work brings together a unique combination of strategy, writing, creativity, and psychology to create written and visual content tailored to brands and audiences. Out-of-Box Content is an industry-agnostic, end-to-end content and marketing agency based in Bangalore. She is a homeopath and certified interventional yoga practitioner. She believes in sustainable living and participates in city-led green initiatives and engages in forums on women empowerment, transgender, and LGBT rights. Welcome, Dr. Charmaine Kanita. Over to you.
Thank you, Anandita. Thanks for having me on here, Manoj, Sandhya, and thank you, our panelists. Let me just introduce Mr. Kiran and Smeera. So Mr. Kiran is a businessman and he has a proven track record of scaling multi-billion-dollar businesses, leading complex operations, global teams. He's a qualified chartered accountant and chartered financial analyst. Prior to Google, he founded Fosbury Flop, a startup that consulted on impact and innovation by connecting the dots between consumer psychology and communication technology. Prior to that, he has served as the Director of Marketing at Microsoft India and VP of Hardware Marketing for IBM Asia Pacific. Kiran is currently the Managing Director of Google and joins us from Singapore. Welcome, Kiran. And Ms. Meera Mupidri, she's a section coordinator for pre-K to grade 2 at Inventure Academy. Meera has over a decade of experience with early childhood space. She believes that every child is unique and it is a responsibility of each educator to nurture the individuality of each child. So thank you for being here and especially talking about this topic that is empathy in education for all stakeholders. So to begin with, I would just like to say that when it comes to this emotion, to this, empathy, to this concept, it was something that we grew up with. It was modeled for us and not something that we learned and which we do practice. So how has it come to be that something that was so inherent has now become a topic, a subject to be discussed and brought back into it? So I would just like your thoughts on it, Kiran, then, yeah.
I'd love to hear Meera's point of view on this too.
Sure.
But Charmaine, to your point, look, I think for me, I was fortunate enough to have grown in a household where the aspect of empathy wasn't an intentional, activity. It was just organically the way things were. And some of it could have come from a very intentional religious practice to begin with. But I think in a lot of ways, the aspect of just saying being connected with your emotions or connected with your inner self was something which just came naturally. And one of the things which I found which was very interesting was that I actually, and I'm not advocating that that's the only way to teach. I do believe that there is an aspect where you do this as a natural way of life. Yeah. But there are also aspects of this which I believe that in a society that we also have to bring it to bear in very intentional ways. I think if there has been one learning that I took away from my experience working in the States has been this aspect. For example, the topic of diversity. There's one way to do this organically, But there's another way to do it very intentionally, that you come in, state your purpose. And both those bring in very different aspects of empathy in my mind. In a work environment, or in a school environment, my belief is, yes, there has to be the culture of empathy that a school and the parents bring in. And now you may or may not get it. But I think an equally important aspect that forces the conversation is when it is an intentional topic, when it is an agenda on the board. So at Google, we organize the world's information. And that's a very touchy topic for many people. Many people don't want that information to be organized.
Okay.
But I think unless and until we are explicit about our intentions about it and how we empathetically deal with data, as a company, we would believe that we will collectively fail. So throwing out my initial thoughts, with you.
Yes. Yeah.
I agree. I actually agree with both of you. In the olden days, or when we grew up, empathy was just part and parcel of how you dealt with family, you dealt with your circle of influence. Now it has changed a little bit. I don't think it has changed much. Our families have become a lot more nuclear. We have a lot more children who are single children. And empathy is a little more difficult for them to understand, which is where, to Kiran's point, it becomes intentional. Where as a school, as adults in a child's life, we model empathy. And the other intentional aspect that as a school community, we have the onus of doing is to actually show children that this is what empathy is. This is what you do. And to actually illustrate that verb to them. For example, we do a lot of units across our school where we actually show children that, see, when you do these things, what you are actually demonstrating is empathy. When you call out positive behavior, when you call out certain actions of a child or of a community, you are giving them a positive reinforcement that, we appreciate that, so do more of that. So empathy becomes very intentional, but at the same time, it is something that as adults in a child's life, whether it is parents or teachers, we model. So our school, for example, does a lot of community outreach. We have a lot of government schools that we have adopted, and we do a lot of outreach with them where the children are involved. So as a community, we are modeling the fact that you help those who need it. You use the privilege that you have to help those who need it. So I think, yes, empathy is now something that we need to intentionally bring in. It's not something that's happening organically.
Okay. So when you were speaking, you did connect the fact that reinforcing positive behavior is a part of it. But I remember growing up where, there was not much of an emphasis on pulling up such behavior, but with the fact that probably by, moderating the reaction, the child would do better, would improve, as opposed to just giving them what they sought at the first instance. So these are two very contradicting, viewpoints. So when you say model positive behavior, is that then going to, be a very, that the seeking that the child, has as a part of their action, will it then resolve that seeking? Will they do better, or will it, just make them satisfied with their action? So I just want to understand this concept of reinforcing positive behavior. How do you relate it?
I would say, much like our parents or our extended family modeled behavior for us, now as the adults in the child's life and as a school community, you model that behavior. And what you also do, when I say call out positive behavior, what you also do is, if there are certain actions that a child or a community has taken, you appreciate it. That appreciation for it, yes, like you said, was missing earlier. But now we actually need to let children know that, this is something that you should be looking at. This is something you should be doing. So that in case you're not getting that, there is an implicit aspect of it where you model it, but there's also an explicit aspect of it where you call it out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Just to add to what you said, the aspect of empathy that I find interesting is academics has a time and a place in a day that you're taught. You basically said, okay, you have to do 5 hours of academics. There's a 1-hour class on mathematics. There's a 1-hour class on English. Unfortunately, the topic of empathy is not to be constrained into a 5-hour or a 4-hour. It's an always-on conversation, right? So in a lot of ways, I believe this is where the hand-holding between a formal institution and the home has to be, the value system has to match. In a lot of ways, when you go to a classroom, you learn the explicit aspects of empathy, which you very well articulated in saying, serve a community, serve people who don't have. I think in many of our cases, our children don't know what it means to not have something. We have provided them even before they've asked for it. So in many cases, it's a shocker to go to a government school and say, no, there is a large part of the society aspect in a school. You're also constrained that beyond the point, you cannot have the aspect of fixing negative things. So what you do, you actually model positive behavior. At home, though, I found it very interesting that we actually, one of the most difficult job that I have done in my life is being a parent. Absolutely, without doubt. And the reason why I say that is because this is the aspect where the raw material that I have worked with is all the negative energies that I've had. When it was my husband, when we were just between me and my wife, getting angry was okay, getting irritated was fine. We'll shout out a few words. In front of children, constantly modeling that doesn't happen. You had to work on it. If you had to get something, children don't behave the way we ask them to do it. They just monkey see, monkey do. They just copy parent. And in a lot of ways, I think the need to be a better human being has never been more for me ever since I became a parent. Simply because I feel that if I don't do that, I'm passing on genes to the next generation, which I don't want. I also feel that's the area where the biggest raw materials that we have had active conversations as a family is how do we make sure that things which we were considered okay in dealing with, which was generally not okay, is things which we don't model. So yeah, I find that really fascinating. Empathy is a constant topic. The schools reinforce the positive aspects of it. At home, you need to work on the hard negative aspects of it. You've got to face it.
Yeah. So in this, between parents and kids, then you throw into the mix the school, the education system, especially in the last 2 years, it has, brought out tempers. It's been there has been conflict, to be real. The fact that the teaching has come to the home, the fact that what we as parents outsourced to some part to the, to school to get that done there, we have to take that responsibility on board. So how has then, the whole idea of empathy has pretty much not been there. The fact that we try and understand how the teaching works, how the education system understands what parents are going through. So Meera, I just like your thoughts on how has it been from an educator's point of view.
So taking off from what Kiran was saying, much like we model behavior at home, certain things that were okay to do when it's just a couple, we become so conscious of it. I think that's something that teachers have been doing for decades consciously in school. You can't roll your eyes when a child makes an absurd statement. You learn to moderate your behavior. You learn to make sure that you're being positive about what they're doing, not calling them out. Similarly, I would say empathy actually is intrinsic to a lot of the classes that we do. We didn't realize how much. For example, it was an eye-opener for me because you see all of these children on screen constantly and you realize how your modeling of behavior, what tone of voice you use, is something that the children are picking up and passing on. So there are certain phrases that I use, I realize, when I'm talking to a child who doesn't look as engaged in class. There are children I see who use the same phrases when they ask their peers. Is something bothering you? Can I help in some way? would you like a little bit of time by yourself? Those are phrases that I have realized that I used unconsciously, but I realize that my children now use those phrases and model that phrases. And to your point, yes, the partnership that parents and teachers have had, parents and school has had, has always been there. This time, in the past 1.5 years, it has become very, very explicit and open. We have come to realize how interdependent and how interconnected we are, and how dependent we are on each other, having the similar value systems, like Kiran said, that, the school and the home, how our value systems have to be very similar. As an educator, we had to up our empathy levels, not just to be empathetic towards the child, which we have always done, but also suddenly put yourself in a parent's shoes. And say, like, as teachers, I'm juggling my children, my home, and working from home, and have responsibilities of work. Like that, parents have the same thing. They are trying to juggle all of it. So as a teacher, as a school, am I moderating the demands that I have on them? Do I understand their perspective? Am I conscious of the fact that they are also struggling? What are the platforms that as a school, as a teacher, as a community I have created where my children, the parents feel like they can tell us that, what, I'm struggling right now. So there are small things like we started to do because we realized how much, as a teacher, I have to balance the outcomes that I want in terms of academics or beyond academics or, the co-curricular activities with the struggles that parents have. Very small thing, giving parents a heads up 10 days ahead. This is what is coming up. This is what your child needs. This is where I will need your support. Yeah. Another simple thing where we redid our timetables multiple times just to ensure that whatever the child needed to do academically, we finished in class. So there was no homework that was going. Because it's a struggle for parents. When I'm working from home and I'm working extended hours, it's a struggle. So very small things demonstrate that empathy. Letting go of, someday assignment is not done, just let go because you realize that there is a struggle that's happening at home. Yeah. Those are little ways where we model how to be a better human being, I think.
Yeah, yeah. But when you, do this on a day-to-day basis and understand the parents, is there also a way where you include parents or into any kind of, teaching, any methodologies, anything where they are a part of it, just to understand this whole?
So for very young learners, my early years, sometimes parents do sit around with the children. But as the kids grow older, we actually tell parents that let them be. It's okay if it doesn't get done to your idea of perfection. We are fine with that. We will take care of it. We will do what we can because parents also need to work. You have school till 12 o'clock. Parents also have a day job, so to speak. So we allow that to happen and say, we will take care of it. Take the load off. And that's something I realize that our parents, every time we meet them, they appreciate.
Yes, thank you. Kiran, I'll just request your input on this. You did mention that you had a startup which was into, innovation, connecting the dots between consumer psychology and communication technology. So there, the whole idea of emotions, thought, feelings do come into play. And I believe you said earlier that the whole intellectuals, that the whole time of that is kind of coming to a stop, and there'll be a lot about intuition and empathy, understanding going forth in business and everywhere. Could you like to share some thoughts on that, something in the business landscape, in technology mainly, because kids are also on there? So yeah.
Charmaine, you touch on a very important question. I was intending to bring it up in some form. First of all, I just want to reinforce what Meera said. She mentioned this point, let them be. It's so true. It resonates so much with me. I actually believe that empathy is something that we unlearn in our lives. We're born with those skills. If you actually watch children play, it's a joy. There's so we actually look at it and say, over years, I think life actually takes a lot of empathy out of us.
Yes.
In many of our cases, small practices like the practice of gratitude, the practice of just addressing our feelings very openly. Yeah, it's just been a great learning experience for me and my wife too, in saying that it's us who have to change. The other changes around us will happen. So this is actually a much more personal exercise. In some way, this is parents back to school rather than our children back to school. But to your point, why do this from a corporate world? Why not have a world where everybody's just intellectually strong, gets out there? Why is empathy so important?
Yeah.
Not just from a pandemic perspective, but what's the business value of empathy? So let me actually just bring my accounting, hat onto that. Think about Indian economy in the last decade. Think about every company that has become $1 billion valuation startup or has gone public. It didn't start with intellect. It started with an idea. It started from an intuition, right? We often forget that value creation actually begins with great intuition and then giving it some direction. And also think about those companies which actually start from an intuitive point of view. In order to bring people on board to that idea, you need to bring people along emotionally. I actually feel that you can hire a lot of intellectually smart people when your company is already big because it's a safety net. But if you are a startup, if you are a founder, in order to bring people along, you have to bring them along emotionally. So there it goes that if you have an idea and you want to bring it to life, managing emotional skill sets is such an important aspect of business. And then if you actually look at the next stage of a startup journey, you have to deal with talent of all kinds. You're not going to have the ability to hire anyone and everyone you want. In fact, you have to actually, the Indian vertical job market today is one in which demand far exceeds supply. So in that case, what is really holding somebody onto a company? It's not a bucket full of cash. It's actually how you feel about an organization. So if anything, I feel that the largest source of value creation, and by the way, it's not just applies to small companies. One of the things that is a healthy paranoia, even in the company that I work for today, is one in which we always believe that we will get into irrelevance when we just have hindsight intelligence as our biggest source. So if Google search was always working on what we always did well, we'll never progress the product in the future. It's about what we learned that we constantly keep ourselves. And many of the time, it's engineers with great ideas who actually become great product leaders. And engineers with great intellect actually just become great coders. So I can give you many, many examples on why I believe, yes, the raw materials of academics are very important. But life skills, value creation, just being happy has so much embedded with our third form of intelligence, which is really fine-tuning our intuitions.
Yes. Thank you for that insight. And you believe that when for kids, for those who are now either with technology in whatever way, as gaming and learning and getting there, is that even possible that emotions come into the picture? In what way can that happen, if I may ask you?
I might be the most unpopular parent on this call today. But in the money household, my older daughter got to experience a computer for the first time at the age of 7. Our kids, even today, we don't have an Xbox at home. We do not have a gaming station at home. Yes, there are lots of values that games can teach. Many of our friends and many of my colleagues actually advocate why I'm being foolish by not giving my kids a computer beforehand because there's so much of learning. But we have chosen to consciously say that, and maybe this is the wrong way of looking at it, but my belief is if we have grown up as a generation who is very comfortable with digital tools, even after adopting it very late in our lives, I would rather have my kids build interpersonal human skills first before they get into the digital medium.
Yes.
So look, we've benefited from it. In fact, we don't have a TV at home. We have a dumb terminal, as I call it. We stream something that we watch together. But I just kind of get a feeling that it's much better when we get our hands dirty, when we are with them, when we are involved with them. There's an unsaid joy. I think not just to them, but to us as parents too. Rather than just experiencing all kinds of emotions through a digital medium.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that.
If I could add to that, I agree with a lot of things. My household was like that, where we didn't have technology.
Yeah.
And to add to what Kiran said, skills like communicating an idea, communicating with peers, communicating with others around you has an intrinsic empathy that you need to have. You need to understand how the other person is processing information. You need to understand where the other person comes from. Collaborating. We do so many exercises with children, which are inbuilt into our curriculum, where the children need to collaborate with each other. And when you collaborate, like he said, you will never have people who think exactly like you. You will never have people who have the exact same skill set. And it's eye-opening to see children, and because I deal with children up to age of 8, it's eye-opening to see how children negotiate those spaces with actually a lot of empathy for the other person. We don't design roles for them, but when you watch the group dynamics, you see, children say, you know what, I will be the illustrator, you be the speaker, you be the planner. They kind of divide the roles based on what they are strongest with. All of that, whether we consciously realize it or not, comes from a level of empathy because you understand what the other person is. That becomes very important. And like he said, those are the people we want, the ones who are intuitive, the ones who can communicate, the one who understands a bigger picture, so to speak.
Understood. Yes. Thank you. Thanks, Meera. So just to summarize whatever we've spoken about, the fact that empathy today is so critical to the ecosystem we are in, to the education setup, the fact that we are on this hybrid offline, online model, and how the whole community, the family, the school, everybody has to come together to kind of build it in a child. So thank you. Thank you for your inputs, your insights, Meera, Kiran. Thank you for being here. And Manoj, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kiran, Meera, and Shamain for wonderfully hosting this program. Kiran, thank you so much for taking our invite and being part of this. It was wonderful hearing you after such a long time. Quite a lot of nostalgia in terms of a lot of activities that we've done together those days. So I still remember those drama practices and stuff like that. So thanks, Kiran, for that. We will catch up on this separately on that. Thank you. And Meera, thank you so much. And a special thanks to InVenture for being our contest sponsor for Educator Speak, which is coming up right after this. So hang around for that. Kiran, more than happy to have you witness some of the best educators in the country and abroad talking about this topic of empathy in education. So feel free to be around. But for now, thank you so much, Kiran, Meera, and a big thanks to Dr. Shamain for hosting this event. Thank you so much. We move on to the Educator Speak right after this. So we'll come back in a couple of minutes with Educator Speak. Thank you so much.